Deep within Washington's mountains and woodlands, something forgotten is stirring. Legends speak of gigantic beings and strange creatures that still wander through the mists, and these stories feel less like folklore and more like warnings. It is time to explore what this land has long concealed. The rock faces overlooking the Columbia River do not communicate with words, yet they possess a profound memory. Carved into the basalt and held fast in petrified wood are symbols that murmur stories across the ages. Known as petroglyphs, they were etched by the hands of ancient peoples, created long before the existence of modern boundaries, fences, or roads. In locations like the Ginkgo petrified forest, these markings seem to lie in wait, silent and mysterious. This is not simply prehistoric graffiti. It represents something far more significant, a chronicle, a cipher, perhaps even a cautionary tale. The Columbia River once served as the region's artery, its currents weaving through the land, now called Washington, like the circulatory system of a slumbering giant. For millennia, native tribes journeyed, hunted, and gathered along its shores. This river was more than just a feature of the landscape. It defined their very existence. Within the Ginkgo petrified forest, where unusual fossilized trees are encased in volcanic ash, ancient artisans created hundreds of petroglyphs on the dark basalt rock that lines the water's edge. While some of these engravings are straightforward spirals, handprints, or geometric designs, others are far more enigmatic. There are depictions of stretched-out humanoid figures with oversized eyes, creatures adorned with horns, and sun-like bursts emanating from heads without bodies. As you stand before them, you can't shake the impression that these were not mere decorations. They held a deep significance, a meaning that has not endured through time. Among the most recognizable images is a figure often called the Spirit Man, depicted with its arms lifted and its head encircled by radiant lines. Some theorize this represents a shaman in a deep trance, communing with the spirit world. Others suggest it portrays a celestial entity or something that descended from the heavens. A powerful link exists between many of these petroglyphs and the cosmos, with researchers proposing alignments to solstices or lunar cycles. Is it possible these carvings were part of an ancient celestial map, a method for marking time or placating beings from above? Then there is the more disquieting aspect. Hidden among the abstract symbols are figures that are clearly not human. These are tall beings with triangular heads, features resembling helmets, what appear to be large eyes, and unnaturally long limbs. Some observers have even argued that certain images depict flight, showing figures with wings or standing beside objects that look like domes or pods. While it is simple to impose our modern concepts onto these ancient symbols, it is equally difficult to dismiss the strange uniformity of such images found in completely separate cultures. Similar humanoid glyphs, uncannily alike in their form and posture, have been discovered in other parts of the world. What would be the reason for this? At the Ginkgo site alone, close to 300 petroglyphs were cataloged before the river's course was altered by the Wanapum Dam in the 1960s. Although many carvings were relocated for preservation and are now viewable in state parks or behind glass, their original orientation and context have been lost. These glyphs were not placed arbitrarily. They were meticulously carved in specific locations, likely oriented in particular directions and situated near certain stones or water formations. Without this original context, we are left with puzzle pieces from a board that no longer exists. This was not an isolated site. Along the vast expanse of the Columbia, from Vantage to the Dalles, petroglyphs are found in groups, consistently near water and in places of perceived power. Some are positioned high above the river where sound carries, while others are found low, near historic fishing areas. The tribes who inhabited this land, the Yakima, Wanapum, Umatilla, and others, regarded these sites with deep reverence, and many continue to do so. In their oral traditions, the petroglyphs are not inanimate objects, but living emblems connected to spiritual realms and ancestral wisdom. Some traditions hold that they were not created by human hands at all, but by spirit beings. Others maintain they were made during vision quests, moments of profound spiritual insight when an individual would fast and venture into the wilderness to find a connection with a greater power. Upon their return, they would carve what they had witnessed. This is where the narrative takes a peculiar turn. A number of petroglyphs seem to depict portals, oval or rectangular forms with figures passing through them. Some show beings in a state of levitation, while others portray bizarre hybrid creatures that are part human and part animal. It makes one wonder if these were literal visions, symbolic representations of shape-shifting, or perhaps a memory of something that breached our world from the sky. One specific carving, now protected behind glass, displays a figure with large, almond-shaped eyes, no mouth, and a glowing aura around its head. To a contemporary observer, it appears almost undeniably extraterrestrial. To the people who created it, it likely represented a spirit, a deity, or another entity they had met and wished to commemorate. However, not all the petroglyphs carry a foreboding tone. Some illustrate animals like elk, bighorn sheep, and birds. Others seem almost celebratory, with dancing figures, linked hands, and spirals suggesting movement. It is easy to overlook that these carvings served both sacred and functional purposes. They recount stories, mark areas of plenty, and encode memories of who lived and died here, where the fish schooled and when the stars aligned. They are history books etched in stone. And yet, they offer no explanations. There are no guides, no Rosetta Stone for the petroglyphs of the Columbia River. This may have been deliberate. Perhaps they were not intended for everyone. A conviction exists among certain tribal elders that the carvings were created to communicate with the land itself or with the spirits that safeguard it, not for the curious gaze of outsiders. This idea gains more weight when you consider how many petroglyphs were concealed. Not all of them were designed to be easily discovered. Some were carved under rock ledges, in cliffside crevices accessible only to a skilled climber. It is as if the most potent or holy symbols were intentionally hidden, forming a language that only a select few could interpret. The immense effort required to carve something only to hide it underscores the gravity of these acts. They were not mere sketches, they were rituals. Adding to the mystery is the petrified forest itself, a bizarre landscape of fossilized wood where trees were transformed into stone over millions of years by volcanic processes. This lends a strange quality to the region, as if time itself has been frozen. Imagine standing where ancient artists once worked, surrounded by crystalline trees and cliffs that reverberate with echoes of the past. You start to grasp why they felt compelled to carve the rocks. The land here vibrates with a certain heaviness, a gravity, as if memory itself is denser. Some people believe these petroglyphs continue to resonate with spiritual energy even after centuries. Visitors have described feeling observed, hearing faint whispers on the wind, or having unusually vivid dreams after spending time at these sites. Whether this is the power of suggestion or something more tangible remains unknown. Perhaps that is the ultimate truth of it all. These symbols were not etched to appease our modern thirst for definitive answers. They were created in an era when the world was imbued with profound meaning, when spirit and stone were not seen as separate entities. They serve as a reminder that ancient peoples perceive things we have forgotten how to see, and they knew how to converse with the land in ways we can no longer comprehend. So, the next time you find yourself near the Columbia River, as the wind howls through the canyon and the setting sun paints the basalt cliffs in fiery red, take a closer look. The walls are communicating through lines and curves, spirals and shadows. They are narrating stories older than our cities, our maps, and perhaps even older than memory itself. And if you remain there long enough, you might just feel the land remembering along with you. Across the plains of southwestern Washington, in a region that ought to be serene and level, the ground itself appears to undulate. Countless low, rounded mounds, like a solid sea of earth, extend for miles in every direction. Some are no bigger than a small fire pit, while others are large enough to accommodate a car. They are arranged with an uncanny regularity, each mound separated by just enough level ground to suggest the pattern was deliberate. This is the Mima Mound's natural area preserve, and no one, not scientists, historians, or tribal elders, can state with certainty how these formations came to be. They simply exist. From an aerial perspective, the pattern seems organic, almost like cells, as if the land itself has goosebumps. But when you stand among them, a stranger feeling begins to take hold. The mounds are not particularly tall, ranging from 2 to 7 feet in height, but they are incredibly dense, filled with stones, gravel, and fine soil. As you walk among them, an odd sense of quiet descends. There is a perceptible rhythm to the space, akin to standing within the ruins of a forgotten building. Yet, there are no foundations, no remnants of structures, only the earth sculpted in a manner that challenges simple explanations. For over 100 years, scientists have examined these mounds, proposing, debating, and ultimately rejecting various theories. Ideas have ranged from soil liquefaction during earthquakes to frost heaving, and even the work of giant gophers. That last theory, surprisingly, has been one of the more enduring explanations, suggesting that burrowing creatures piled up the soil over countless generations. However, for each proposed explanation, there is a significant flaw. Why are the mounds so consistent in their spacing and height? Why do they appear only under very specific geological circumstances? Why are they found in clusters around the globe, in California, South Africa, and even on Mars, but never in precisely the same way? And why are they here? Southwestern Washington is not just some arbitrary stretch of prairie. It lies at the fringe of ancient glacial activity, near the entrance to Puget Sound, and within a territory long held as sacred by its indigenous inhabitants. This land has been traversed, hunted on, and spiritually significant for thousands of years. The Nisqually tribe, whose ancestral lands include the Mima Mounds, possess stories about this place. Stories that speak not of gophers or ice, but of events far older than human memory. Some tales characterize the mounds as the footprints left by sky beings, while others claim they're the burial sites of a lost civilization. In certain narratives, the mounds were formed by the earth itself in response to great sorrow or conflict. There's a deep sense of reverence in these stories, suggesting the mounds are more than just a geological anomaly. They are sacred wounds. When you walk between them, it's hard to dispute that feeling. You notice the peculiar quietness. Even when the wind rustles the prairie grass, the sound seems to be absorbed. As you look around, the horizon plays tricks on your eyes, with each mound casting a small shadow that blurs the perception of distance. The effect is disorienting, beautiful, yet unsettling, as if the land is concealing something just under its surface. Excavating the mounds has not brought much clarity. They are composed of compacted layers of fine silt, gravel, and glacial till, materials that suggest movement, but not a chaotic one. Some mounds extend over 6 feet deep without the distinct layering that would indicate a gradual formation. It's as if something deposited all the material at once and then compacted it. Furthermore, there are no obvious signs of erosion or significant damage, implying the mounds have remained largely unchanged for thousands of years. Some estimates place their age at over 7,000 years, possibly even more. That makes them older than Stonehenge and the pyramids, yet their origin remains a mystery. In more recent times, some have speculated that the mounds could be the product of very specific climatic cycles, where wet and dry seasons interact with plant roots, soil cohesion, and underground water flow. This sounds reasonable until you learn that no one has managed to replicate the mounds in a controlled setting. You can simulate gophers, earthquakes, and freeze-thaw cycles, but nothing has produced these perfectly repeating formations. Then there are the patterns themselves. Some researchers who have mapped the layout of the Mima Mounds have discovered subtle mathematical cadences, almost like natural fractals. Others have noted potential alignments with celestial events, not as precise as a sun temple or a stone circle, but subtle enough to be intriguing. Could the mounds have been altered or enhanced by human hands to mirror something sacred? If they were entirely natural, wouldn't they be more random? This leads to the more unconventional theories. Some propose that the mounds are ancient burial sites for a forgotten people. No human remains have been officially discovered, but very few mounds have been fully excavated. The area is protected, and there is a deep reluctance from both indigenous communities and conservationists to disturb what could be sacred ground. It is also possible that if bodies were once interred here, time and Washington's acidic soil have erased all traces. Others believe the mounds are energy hubs, locations where the Earth's natural energies are concentrated. Theories involving ley lines, magnetic anomalies, and geomagnetic pulses have been proposed. There are anecdotal accounts of people's compasses behaving erratically near certain mound clusters. Some visitors report feeling lightheaded or euphoric while walking through the fields, while others experience sudden headaches, nausea, or the strange sensation of being watched. And then there are those who link the Mima mounds to more cosmic origins, suggesting they could be landing sites, markers, or remnants of a long-lost technology. After all, similar mound formations have been observed in remote deserts, tundras, and even on the Martian landscapes captured by NASA rovers. What is it about this specific shape, this repeating low mound, that seems to manifest in such drastically different environments? Mainstream science, while keeping its distance from such fringe ideas, has not come any closer to providing a definitive answer. This leaves the Mima mounds in a state of unresolved mystery. Everyone acknowledges their existence, their antiquity, and the fact that they do not behave like any other land formation. But no one can agree on the why this makes them one of Washington's most haunting landscapes, not because they are dramatic or perilous, but because they are quietly, fundamentally wrong. The land appears simple, just grass and soil, but something about it feels off. It forces you to pause, to think, and to ask questions that have no answers. And perhaps that is their purpose. Maybe the Mima mounds were never meant to be deciphered. Maybe they are anchors, reminders of a time when the land held secrets that were never written down, when people walked this prairie and found meaning in the very curvature of the ground. Perhaps they left the mounds undisturbed for a reason, or perhaps they didn't create them at all. Beneath the crystalline blue waters of Lake Chelan, deep within the untamed interior of Washington state, an ancient presence is said to be stirring. It is a creature described as long and serpentine, with a head resembling a horse and a body like a serpent. While locals refer to it as a dragon, others dismiss it as mere fantasy. Yet, the legends are more ancient than the state itself, whispered by indigenous storytellers and passed down through generations of miners, loggers, and homesteaders, with reports continuing to emerge even in modern times. Something resides, or once resided, in that lake, and it has left a legacy of fear, fascination, and peculiar encounters. Lake Chelan is no ordinary body of water. It is immense, stretching over 50 miles in length and plunging to depths of over 1,400 feet in some areas, making it the third deepest lake in the United States. It carves a path through the Cascades like a submerged canyon, nourished by snowmelt and glacial streams, and bordered by cliffs that rise sharply from its edges. It is a remote, wild place full of concealed coves and dark abysses that sunlight seldom penetrates. If something were to hide here, it would have more than enough space to remain unseen. Long before the arrival of settlers, the Chelan people, a part of the interior Salish tribes, shared tales of a mighty entity that dwelled in the lake's depths. It was not depicted as a mindless beast, but as a guardian or, at times, a harbinger of warning. One story tells of a spirit creature, long and snake-like, with eyes that burned like fire and the power to churn the water into deadly vortexes. When provoked, it could conjure storms or capsize canoes. Offerings were made to it before fishing excursions, and elders cautioned children against speaking the creature's name near the water. This being was not just a myth. It was a daily reminder of a lake's formidable power. When European settlers arrived in the 1800s, They brought their own language but encountered something they could not explain. Early miners reported seeing a massive aquatic animal swimming near the lake's eastern end, its back breaking the surface like a colossal eel. In 1892, the crew of a steamboat allegedly saw a large, dark creature moving parallel to their vessel, diving beneath the surface whenever they steered towards it. They dubbed it a lake dragon. Others were not as fortunate. An account from the early 1900s tells of a fishing party that disappeared overnight. Their boat was later discovered partially submerged and ripped apart, with no bodies or signs of a struggle, only shredded canvas and oars floating like kindling. Locals whispered about the dragon, while official reports blamed a sudden storm, though no such storm had been documented that night. Stories also emerged from Lucerne, an old mining town on the lake's western shore, now long deserted. Miners there spoke of strange noises in the night, groans and hisses like steam escaping from deep underground. A few claimed to have witnessed something enormous rising from the water after dark, visible only by moonlight. One man swore he saw the creature's eye, which he described as round, red, and too large to belong to any known animal. Decades later, in the 1940s, a pilot flying low over Lake Chelan observed a significant disturbance on the water's surface, a massive wake with no boat or wind to account for it. He circled back and saw what he described as a black coil disappearing beneath the waves. While the report was never officially investigated, the pilot maintained his story for the rest of his life. Skeptics, naturally, suggest more ordinary explanations such as sturgeon, floating logs, or optical illusions. While some sightings might be explained away, what about the consistency of the descriptions? When the creature is described, it is almost always the same. A long body, sometimes with scales or ridges, a head like a horse, and movements too swift for any known fish. A particularly strange tale from the 1960s involves a group of teenagers camping near Stehekin who claimed to see something emerge from the water in the middle of the night. They described it as being longer than a car, with steam rising from its back. One of them recalled it making a deep rumbling sound before it slid back into the lake without a splash. They never returned to that campsite. The lake itself adds to the enigma. Chelan is not just deep. It is geologically mysterious, with fault lines and unexplored underwater caves. Divers have reported abrupt thermoclines, sharp drops in temperature that could indicate hidden channels or geothermal vents. Some speculate that if the creature is real, it might be using these vents or caves to hide or migrate. Then there is the intense cold. The lake is fed by glacial water and snow melt, remaining frigid all year, even on the surface. Most animals could not survive in such an environment. But what if something ancient evolved to adapt? Something suited to darkness, pressure, and silence. In recent years, the stories have become less frequent, but they have not ceased entirely. A kayaker in 2004 reported seeing something pass beneath them just under the surface. A huge, slow-moving shape that cast a shadow as long as a school bus. In 2017, a group of hikers near the lake filmed ripples moving in a serpentine pattern with no boat or wind present, just smooth, gliding waves. The video circulated online, but was dismissed due to the lack of clear visuals. Nevertheless, the legend endures. Locals still talk about the Chelan dragon with a mix of amusement and reverence. Most do not profess to believe, yet they avoid swimming in the lake after dark. If you ask around, you will find people who know someone who has seen something, a shape, a shadow, a ripple that defied explanation. One theory, more metaphysical than scientific, posits that the dragon is not a physical creature at all, but a type of spirit, a protector or guardian of the lake's energy. It is said to appear when a natural balance is disturbed or when a significant change is imminent. This aligns with indigenous traditions, where water beings are often seen as powerful spiritual forces connected to the natural order. They are not monsters, they are watchers. Perhaps that is what makes the legend so captivating. It's not just the idea that something large is living beneath the water. It's the possibility that we are not alone in the places we claim as our own. It's the thought that something ancient could still be observing, waiting, and moving just below the surface of our everyday world. Whether it is a serpent, a dragon, or something for which we have no words, the mystery of Lake Chelan remains. The water is cold, the cliffs are steep, the silence is profound, and sometimes that silence ripples. Mount Rainier stands like a colossal sentinel in the heart of Washington, silent, snow-capped, and utterly immense. Soaring over 14,000 feet into the sky, it is a mountain that doesn't just command the horizon, it defines it. But Rainier's secrets lie deeper than its ice and rock. According to centuries of whispered tales, something else inhabits, or once inhabited, its remote valleys and shadowed slopes. Something gigantic and not entirely human. They are known as the Mount Rainier Giants. To be clear, these are not just modern Bigfoot stories. While Sasquatch sightings are certainly a part of the local lore, the legends surrounding the giants of Mount Rainier are older, more peculiar, and at times, more frightening. The local indigenous tribes, including the Puyallup, Nisqually, and Cowlitz, speak of beings who dwarf humans, resided high in the mountains, and wielded incredible strength. These were not portrayed as wandering beasts. They were people, giant people, covered in hair, but described as possessing intelligence, using tools, and even having a tribal structure. Some were said to be hostile, others reclusive, but all were powerful and commanded fear. A story from the Nisqually tradition recounts a group of hunters who tracked game into the mountain's higher ridges and never came back. Weeks later, a single survivor stumbled out of the wilderness, starving, delirious, and injured. He spoke of enormous figures that moved silently through the trees, with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness and voices that resonated like tumbling boulders. He claimed the others had been taken, not killed or eaten, but simply taken. Similar stories exist across various tribal traditions, with accounts of entire camps falling silent near Rainier's glacial valleys, massive footprints appearing overnight outside longhouses, and deep, guttural singing echoing off the cliffs during the winter. These beings were said to be territorial, but not inherently malevolent, unless one trespassed into certain sacred areas. Then, they became something else entirely. Moving forward to the settler era in the mid to late 1800s, early trappers and prospectors began exploring Mount Rainier's backcountry in their quest for furs and gold. They returned with tales that newspapers were reluctant to publish. These stories included strange howls in the night, boulders being hurled at their camps from unseen heights, and massive silhouettes glimpsed at the edge of their campfire light, too large to be a bear and too erect to be anything else. One of the most enduring rumors from this period involves a group of prospectors who disappeared near the Carbon Riverside of Rainier. Search parties discovered their camp in disarray, torn apart not by weather or animals. Their tents were shredded, food supplies scattered, and tools bent out of shape. There was no blood and no tracks, just an eerie silence and the faint odor of wet fur. Skeptics attributed such incidents to paranoia, wildlife encounters, or harsh weather. But the mountain continued to claim people. Every year, even today, hikers go missing on Mount Rainier. Some are eventually found, but many are not. It is a vast, treacherous landscape with glaciers, cliffs, and sudden, violent storms. It is also home to hundreds of square miles of pristine wilderness, places untouched by any trail, and in these remote areas, things are still seen. There is a consistent pattern of sightings in the area near Spray Park and the Moich Lake region. Hikers have reported hearing heavy footsteps moving parallel to them through the dense woods. Footsteps too heavy for a deer and too quiet for a human. In 1997, one group claimed they were awakened in the night by what sounded like deep, rhythmic breathing just outside their tent. When they looked, they saw nothing, but the next morning they discovered enormous, bare footprints. In 2002, two park rangers on a snowmobile patrol saw what they initially thought was a bear crossing a ridgeline. Then, the figure stood up, walked on two legs, and looked directly at them. They were half a mile away, but both rangers described the figure as massive, like something from a storybook. The report was never officially filed, as they wished to avoid the attention. The area around Mount Rainier also has a strange history of rockfalls, with boulders tumbling down slopes where there is no apparent cause. Geologists attribute this to melting ice and natural erosion. But in tribal legends, the giants of the mountain were known for throwing stones as warnings to signal that intruders were getting too close. Then there are the caves. Mount Rainier is riddled with lava tubes, glacier-carved tunnels, and deep ravines filled with snow and mist. While some caves are mapped, many are not. Local legends speak of entire networks of tunnels beneath the mountain, hidden realms where the giants sleep or retreat when the snows come. Some believe these caves are gateways to an older world, a realm beneath our own. A particularly strange account comes from a climber in the 1980s who said he fell into a crevasse near the Tahoma Glacier. While awaiting rescue, he claimed to hear voices, deep, slow, and echoing, speaking in a language he did not understand. He initially thought he was hallucinating, and perhaps he was. But what he remembered most vividly was not the words, but the sound of something immense moving beneath the ice. Could the Mount Rainier giants be connected to the Sasquatch legend? Some believe they are one and the same, just different names for the same beings. Others disagree, arguing that the Rainier giants are something older and rarer. They suggest that while Sasquatch are reclusive and scattered, the giants are rooted to the mountain itself. This theory finds some support in how these beings are described, not as individual creatures, but as guardians, sentinels, and protectors of the mountain. A recurring theme in both tribal stories and modern sightings is the idea of trespass, that people who venture too far into certain areas, especially at particular times of the year, are at risk. Not because the mountain itself is dangerous, but because something on it is watching, judging, and deciding if you belong there. This is why, to this day, some tribal elders advise against camping in certain high valleys, not out of superstition, but out of respect. They say there are places you simply do not go, not because you will be attacked, but because you might be seen. And once you have been seen by the giants, things change. Is it all just legend? It could be. These stories might have been passed down to keep people safe in a harsh landscape. But there is a consistency in the accounts that makes them difficult to ignore, spanning generations, cultures, and time periods. The descriptions remain unchanged. The mountain remains unchanged. And the feeling people get when they're alone on those high ridges, that does not change either. Mount Rainier looms large, not just because of its physical height, but because of what it contains: ice, fire, silence, and perhaps watchers. Giant ones with long memories and a fierce understanding that not everything on this land belongs to us. Sometimes the earth guards its secrets with snow and stone, and sometimes it just stands there watching. In the most remote corner of Washington's Olympic Peninsula, where the Pacific Ocean collides with dark volcanic cliffs and the rainforest converges with the sea, there is a coastline that conceals one of the most significant archaeological puzzles in the Pacific Northwest. It is a place where time did not just elapse. It came to a halt. Here, an entire indigenous village was engulfed by mud, sealed beneath the earth, and lost to memory for centuries until nature itself brought it back to light. This is Ozette, a once flourishing Makah settlement that was buried by a storm and rediscovered like a time capsule from the past. For millennia, the Makah people had thrived on this coast. They were masters of the sea, expert whalers, carvers, and navigators of one of North America's most treacherous stretches of ocean. The village of Ozette, however, was particularly special. It was more than just a camp. It was a center of life, commerce, ritual, and knowledge, situated right where Cape Alava now meets the turbulent waves. Then, around the late 1500s, a catastrophe occurred. A colossal mudslide, likely triggered by severe storms or a powerful earthquake, cascaded down from the cliffs above and entombed 6 longhouses. In a single moment, an entire section of the village was swallowed, preserved beneath a thick layer of wet clay. The Makah survivors relocated northward, establishing a new settlement in what is now Bay. But they did not forget OZ. They simply left it buried, silent and sacred. It remained in this state for centuries. Then, in 1970, a ferocious winter storm ravaged the coastline. Waves lashed the shore, trees were uprooted, and something peculiar began to emerge from the mud. Cedar planks, wooden bowls, and whale bones etched with elaborate designs. At first, there were only fragments, but soon a clearer picture started to form. What had been uncovered was not mere debris. It was history, intact, untouched, and flawlessly preserved by the very mud that had buried it. Archaeologists, working in close collaboration with the Makah tribe, hurried to the site. What they unearthed was unlike anything previously discovered in North America. Over 55,000 artifacts were found, buried in the mud but shielded from air, erosion, and decay. There were wooden masks that still retained their paint, fishing hooks crafted from bone and antler, and an array of tools, combs, toys, baskets, and weapons. Everything someone in that village might have used, held, or left behind on the day the mudslide struck. The state of preservation was astonishing. Wooden bowls still carried the faint scent of smoke, and cordage remained flexible. Even footprints were found in the preserved soil, marking the exact spots where people had walked just moments before the earth gave way. It was like stepping into a room that everyone had just vacated. One of the most poignant discoveries was a wailing shrine, a testament to the Makah's deep, ritualized connection with the ocean. Whale bones were carefully arranged, harpoons were meticulously stored, and ceremonial objects were wrapped in bark and cedar. These were not just tools for survival. They were sacred instruments, part of a spiritual and cultural interplay between humans and the planet's largest creatures. And this is where the mystery deepens. The artifacts discovered at OZ revealed a story far more intricate than anyone had imagined. The level of craftsmanship was comparable to anything found in ancient Europe or Asia. The extent of their trade was vast, with objects showing influences from tribes hundreds of miles away. The sophistication of their society, its artistry, organization, and spiritual systems, challenged every outdated notion about pre-contact indigenous civilizations. OZ was not a primitive settlement. It was an advanced, strategic society deeply attuned to its environment in a way we are still trying to comprehend today. This raises a larger question. What else is buried along these coasts? If a single storm can unveil an entire village frozen in time, how many more secrets are lying in wait beneath the cliffs, under the sea, or deep within the rainforest? The Makah people have always been aware of the depth of their history, but the rediscovery of OZ provided something powerful. Proof not only of survival, but of brilliance and excellence. It demonstrated that indigenous knowledge was not just an oral tradition. It was embodied in architecture, technology, and cultural memory preserved in wood and bone. Yet, despite all that has been learned from OZ, the site continues to hold its secrets. Only a fraction of the village was excavated, with many sections left untouched and buried out of respect. The Makah Nation was deeply involved in the excavation process, but also set clear boundaries on what should be disturbed. After all, this is not merely an archaeological site. It is a burial ground and a cultural memory. Strange occurrences were reported during the excavation. Some workers felt as though they were being watched, particularly near the entrances to the longhouses. Tools would disappear, only to reappear days later in unusual places. One researcher swore they heard faint, rhythmic singing coming from the Trilene at night. Whether one believes in spirits or not, it is evident that the land around OZ possesses a unique energy, a certain weight. The village is now part of a protected heritage site, and many of the artifacts are preserved at the Makah Cultural and Research Center in Need Bay, a living museum operated by the tribe for the tribe. But the story of OZ is not just about history. It is a reminder that the earth has a memory, that entire worlds can disappear in a single night and re-emerge centuries later to challenge everything we thought we knew. It tells us that beneath our feet, under the moss, mud, and stone, there are stories waiting to be told. And sometimes the past is not gone. It is just buried, waiting for the right combination of wind, waves, and storm. In the tranquil town of Sequim, situated between the Olympic Mountains and the Strait of Juan de Fuca, a man was digging a pond. That was all. A local farmer named Emmanuel Manis was simply trying to improve his land in 1977. He was not on a quest for secrets or attempting to rewrite history. He just wanted a small body of water for his ducks. But what his backhoe struck was not mud or rock. It was bone, immense, ancient, and stained by the passage of time. It was the kind of thing that should not have been there, and it was not alone. What followed was one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in North American history, a quiet revelation that fundamentally altered our understanding of early humans on this continent. It was the beginning of what would become known as the Manis Mastodon site, and it changed the timeline of human history forever. Initially, no one was certain what the bone was. Manis himself believed it belonged to a cow, but when scientists arrived, they quickly uncovered the truth. This was not just any bone. It was a mastodon tusk, buried with the remains of an entire Ice Age giant. But there was something even more remarkable. One of the creature's ribs had been pierced, and embedded deep within it was a pointed object, a weapon. This discovery turned everything upside down. The weapon, after careful study, X-rays, and confirmation through advanced imaging, was found to be made of bone itself, sharpened into a projectile, likely a spear point. It was not made of metal or stone. It was organic, intentionally crafted, probably from another mastodon's bone. It had been propelled with enough force to penetrate layers of muscle and embed itself in the rib of this colossal beast. And it had been done by humans. This might seem straightforward today, but at the time, it was a revolutionary finding. For decades, archaeologists had held the belief that the first humans arrived in North America via the Bering Land Bridge approximately 13,000 years ago. The Clovis culture, famous for their unique stone spear points, was considered the first chapter of human history on the continent. However, this mastodon had been hunted, killed, and pierced thousands of years before the Clovis people walked the plains. Radiocarbon dating placed the event at around 13,800 years ago, nearly a millennium older than any previously accepted evidence. This meant that not only had people arrived in this region earlier than previously thought, but they were already well established, skilled enough to craft weapons from bone, and courageous enough to hunt mammoths. Here's the most astonishing part. They accomplished this in the Pacific Northwest, not in the Midwest or Southwest where most Clovis-era sites had been discovered. This implied that the story of early human migration was more complex than previously understood. It suggested that early humans might have followed the coast rather than just migrating south from the Arctic interior. It meant that tribes and families were navigating rivers, living along shorelines, and coexisting with the sea. It was like discovering a hidden chapter in a book you thought you had already read, only to realize the story began long before the first page. But the mystery did not end there. The Manis mastodon was not just a fossil. It was a scene, a moment frozen in time, and every detail raised new questions. How did these early hunters manage to bring down a mastodon? These creatures were enormous, standing 10 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing over 5 tons. Even modern elephants are dangerous to hunt. Did they work in coordinated groups, use traps, or wait for the animal to be injured or weakened? And who were these people? No stone tools were found at the site, nor were there any signs of a permanent settlement. Just the bones, the embedded weapon, and the mud that had preserved them. Some experts believe these early humans were part of a nomadic group, following herds and seasonal patterns. Others suggest that the absence of tools might indicate they were not a hunting party at all, but scavengers who stumbled upon a dying or already deceased mastodon. However, this still does not explain the weapon. The bone point was lodged deep within the rib, not the result of an accidental jab or a postmortem prod. It had penetrated the animal while it was still alive. This means someone got close enough to strike, and they struck with great force. Years after the initial excavation, scientists used high-resolution imaging to examine the rib more closely. Their findings were clear. The point had splintered under the pressure of impact. The mastodon had survived the wound for a short period before succumbing. This raises another possibility. Perhaps this was part of a protracted battle, one of several wounds inflicted during a slow, arduous hunt. It is a sobering thought to imagine. Picture a dense, fog-shrouded forest near ancient Sequim, with towering cedars and the scent of damp earth. A herd of mastodons moves through the undergrowth, and hidden nearby, a group of early humans watches, waits, knowing that failure means starvation, but success means sustenance for weeks. And in the midst of it all, a single spear with a sharpened bone tip is thrown by hand, altering history with one powerful blow. Today, the site has been preserved, and a replica of the mastodon is displayed in local museums. But the questions it raised continue to resonate. Who were the people who hunted the Manus mastodon? Where did they go? What else did they leave behind? The truth is, the Pacific Northwest is full of landscapes that have yet to be fully explored. Forests, wetlands, and ancient floodplains that could still hold evidence of these earliest humans. And if the Manus site has taught us anything, it is that we have only just begun to uncover the surface. One spear point, just a few inches long, was enough to shift an entire scientific paradigm. What else is out there, waiting to be discovered? The deeper story here is not just about a mastodon. It is about the nature of time itself, how fragile and elusive history can be, and how a single moment, one strike, one embedded point can ripple across millennia, changing everything we thought we knew. So, the next time you find yourself on a muddy trail in western Washington, look closer. You never know what secrets are buried just beneath your feet, or what stories the land still holds. All it takes is a shovel, a bit of luck, and a great deal of wonder. Venture into the deep forests of the Cascade or Olympic Mountains, and you will almost instantly grasp why the legend of Sasquatch has such a powerful hold on this region. The trees soar endlessly toward the sky, draped in moss and shrouded in mist. Sound behaves differently here. Footsteps are muffled by pine needles, and your sense of scale becomes distorted. What appears near is actually far, and what seems small could be immense. This is the kind of environment where something could be watching you, and you would be completely unaware. This is the heart of Sasquatch country, and Washington State, more than any other place in North America, has become the unofficial capital of Bigfoot lore. The stories did not start with blurry photos or shaky home videos. They originated long before European settlers ever set foot in the Pacific Northwest. Indigenous tribes of the area, such as the Lummi, Snoqualmie, Yakama, and Quinault, have shared oral histories of a large, hairy, human-like creature that resides in the mountains. For some, it was a protector, for others, a trickster. But it was always depicted as powerful, elusive, and undeniably real. The names for this being varied: Saskatchewan in the Halkomelem language of British Columbia, Skookum in Chinook jargon, and Chatko among the Salish. But the descriptions were remarkably consistent. It was described as tall, towering over any human, covered in thick hair, strong enough to rip trees from the earth, and most importantly, deeply connected to the land. They were not seen as monsters, but as forest people, beings with their own language, culture, and the ability to choose whether or not to be seen. This idea that Sasquatch controls its visibility is fundamental to understanding the legend. It is not just about hiding, it is about having agency. In the 20th century, sightings of Sasquatch began to be reported by hikers, hunters, and loggers, particularly in Washington. From Mount Adams to Snoqualmie Pass, and from the shadowy river valleys of the Olympics to the moss-laden Hoh rainforest, people started reporting encounters that did not align with any known wildlife. These included massive footprints, a pungent, musky odor that lingered in the air with no apparent source, trees snapped at impossible heights, and the unmistakable sound of something large moving just beyond the line of sight. In 1924, a group of miners at Mount St. Helens claimed to have been attacked by a band of ape men. They reported that the creatures hurled rocks at their cabin throughout the night. While the press dismissed them as delusional, the locals were not so quick to judge. The area became known as Ape Canyon, And to this day, people report eerie experiences there, such as screams in the night and strange shadows moving between the trees. In the decades that followed, sightings continued, some of them dramatic. Motorists claimed that a tall, dark figure dashed across the road in front of their vehicles. Other encounters were more subtle, with campers waking to find enormous footprints circling their tents. In 1967, the infamous Patterson-Gimlin film cemented the image of Bigfoot in popular culture, a lumbering figure turning slightly as it strode through a California creek bed. But here in Washington, the legend was already well established and thriving. The physical evidence is a mixed assortment. Casts of footprints have been made, some measuring over 15 inches long, with dermal ridges that seem too intricate to be faked. Hair samples have been collected, although DNA tests often come back inconclusive or identify known animals. Despite this, the sightings persist into the 21st century, with reports coming from people from all walks of life: veterans, police officers, scientists, and even former skeptics. What makes Washington unique is not just the sheer number of sightings, but the terrain itself. The Cascade Range is a rugged spine of volcanic peaks, steep ravines, and dense alpine forests. Visibility is often limited, access is challenging, and the weather can change in an instant. The Olympic Mountains, on the other hand, are home to one of the few temperate rainforests in the continental United States, a place so dense and primordial that it feels untouched by time. If there is any place left where a large creature could remain hidden for centuries, it is here. Then there is the behavior attributed to Sasquatch. Witnesses consistently describe a pattern of territorial rock throwing, tree knocking as a form of communication, and a distinctive scream or howl that escalates in pitch and volume. In some areas, these behaviors seem to follow people, almost as if they are being warned to leave. Could these be misidentified bears or echoes in the trees? It's possible, but not always. Some accounts become even stranger. There are perfectly reasonable, grounded individuals who claim to have experienced moments of missing time in areas known for Sasquatch activity. Others describe a sudden, suffocating silence in the forest, as if even the birds are holding their breath. A few speak of the creature staring at them, not as prey and not with fear, but with a sense of awareness, as if it recognizes them. Those who lean toward a more metaphysical interpretation believe that Sasquatch is not just a cryptid, but something in between, a being that exists on the edge of our reality, capable of shifting between physical and spiritual states. This theory is rooted in tribal stories that describe Sasquatch as watchers or guardians between worlds, inhabiting the liminal spaces where reality thins. Of course, mainstream science steers clear of such ideas. Even the biological argument for Bigfoot is considered tenuous in academic circles. How could such a large creature survive without more substantial physical evidence? Where are the bones, the bodies? But this question assumes that Sasquatch behaves like a typical animal. What if it doesn't? What if it is intelligent enough to bury its dead, avoid trails, move at night, and stay one step ahead of us because it has always known we were coming? There is something stubborn about the Sasquatch legend. It refuses to fade away, surviving ridicule, disbelief, and even commercialization. Perhaps that is because, deep down, we recognize something in it, a reflection of the wildness we have lost, a reminder that not every corner of the world has been mapped and not every mystery has been solved. It suggests that somewhere deep in the moss and shadow, something ancient still moves. So, the next time you're hiking through the Cascades or standing alone beneath the dripping canopy of the Olympics, listen carefully. The forest has a rhythm, a pulse, and every now and then it changes just slightly, a tree knock, a gust of wind that wasn't wind, a shadow that lingers. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe, just maybe, you're not as alone as you think.